Hi everyone, I'm Stevens Preston and a senior management major and Parker Business Scholar in the Parker College of Business at Georgia Southern University. Today I have with me Dr. John Harris, Assistant Professor of Management in the Parker College. He's going to break down his latest research for us and explain what it means to business professionals.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and be able to sort of deliver this information and be able to talk about some research.
Can you briefly summarize your research project and its conclusion?
Absolutely. So the nature of this research was focused on two primary areas. The first is the concept of political skill. And political skill is what we would call a social effectiveness construct, particularly when it's used in the context of work. It's looking at how people can understand other people in their work environment and the social situations that they're in, and then be able to use those or that knowledge to extract some benefit from that and to sort of be able to influence that environment. The second piece of it is around relationships, particularly relationships between leaders and followers. So we're looking at sort of the interplay between a leader's political skill and the relationships that they're building with the people who are working for them, the people who are buying into their leadership in some capacity. And there has been some good research in this space previously, and we are looking to expand that, particularly by unpacking the mechanisms by which that political skill actually works. So we know that people who are politically skilled have these abilities, have these understandings, but what are the things that they're actually doing to break down those barriers and to build up these high quality relationships, which we then do see turn into things like higher experiences of job satisfaction, greater levels of performance, greater experiences of justice at work, just higher quality of life in general for their employees. And the three areas in particular that we targeted were leader humility, leader empathy, and then the leader's own perceptions that they have control over the situation. And in general, we found that all those hypothesized relationships ended up working out, and that highly politically skilled leaders were demonstrating more empathy, demonstrating more humility, and did feel like they had a better control, a better grasp over their ability to actually have some say in the kinds of relationships that they have at work. And all those things did pan out into higher quality kind of work life for everyone involved.
So how did you become interested in this topic?
So at the core of all of this is the concept of influence and, I guess, by extension, relationships. And I think that something that has always fascinated me in the entirety of my both working and research career is this sort of inherent interdependence of people at work, and that we are not here by ourselves. We are here in buildings and communities of tons of other people, and that I really have a strong desire to have a better understanding of why certain people get their way, why certain people rise in power or prominence within organizations, why certain people can kind of leverage some of their political skill or their organizational power or their leadership in ways that can influence relationships that they have with other people. And so this is just sort of a reality that I feel like we weren't contending with enough, that we weren't really talking about enough, and that we said that this is the way you're supposed to work, but that really just sits you in a cubicle by yourself, and it ignores the fact that you're talking to all these other people, and that just walking to that cubicle, you're having all of these interactions that can shape your working experience. And I think that I really wanted to dig into better and try to capture better what those sorts of skills and experiences really looked like for people at work.
So what does this mean for business, and how can people in the business community use or benefit from this research?
The simple answer is that political skill is good. Political skill has been widely discussed for a number of decades now, but it's really only in the last 15 to 20 years that we've been capturing it in a research statistical. We've developed a measure to allow us to really gauge this accurately. And time and time again, we see political skill coming up as a solid predictor of great work outcomes. It's good for the people who have it because they're able to sort of better understand and navigate their social waters and their political environment at work. And it's good for the leaders, clearly, too. There's been other research that kind of tackles this leader-follower relationship. And here as well, in this particular piece of research, we are seeing, again, that political skill is good for the people who have it. Political skill is good for those leaders. And so in terms of what businesses can do with this information, I think I'm a strong proponent for admitting it's real. that organizational politics has long been considered a dirty word. It has been considered a bad thing, and that we want to avoid it and pretend like it doesn't exist. But even in that avoidance, we are creating it, and it is a reality of our working lives. Particularly, I would say for the majority of the world, that you are interacting with these people. Personal differences come into play, personal power comes into play, and we need to recognize this reality and train our people to be able to not just know this stuff and see this stuff, but be able to utilize it in ways that don't just kind of lean into the old tropes of politics or bad or evil, but these are ways that we can maybe do great things for our organizations or for our teams or for our followers, and that we are able to better sort of serve the greater goals of the organization or the company with this skill as opposed to in spite of it.
What are some new, challenging, or unanswered questions raised by this research that could be explored?
So a few come to mind initially, the first being that we looked at three particular facets, three sort of actionable behaviors or three experiences that leaders have that might serve as sort of the bridge between leader political skill and higher quality relationships with their followers. And that was, again, humility, empathy, and perceptions of their own control or ability to influence the relationship. But that there is a lot of other stuff that could kind of go into that box and that could maybe explain some of this behavior. I think that an interesting place might be to look at more or maybe darker behaviors, things like disappointment or frustration as selective signals to maybe convey a particular emotion or to influence a relationship in a particular direction. And the other big area is that, again, these are inherently relational, that there are two people or more involved in this process. And so I've spent this time looking at the leader's political skill, but I would love to expand that and also look at the political skill of the followers, because this is not something unique to leadership or unique to people who have formal authority in an organization. And I'd love to see how those two things sort of mesh and how high or low levels relative to one another might change the dynamics of those relationships and change how people interpret them.
Thank you, Dr. Harris, for your time today, and thank you everyone for joining us for this Research That Matters segment.